Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicola Moss, the Head of Marketing for OneStore, and I very quickly wanted to extend a warm welcome to all of the participants on the webinar today about using Microsoft Teams effectively. I think we will all agree that COVID-19 has most definitely been a dramatic turning point for most businesses, forcing us into this flexible or remote working environment, and it has changed the way we work forever. In fact, Microsoft has released some pretty staggering statistics recently on the growth of their Microsoft Teams collaboration tool. In fact, they are currently at 75 million users and it's rising. And OneStore has been supporting many of our customers with migrations to Office 365 and Teams, both before and most certainly during this pandemic. And it's whilst we've been doing this that it's become apparent that our customers are finding that installing Teams and using Teams effectively are two very different things. So in response to the customer queries that we've been receiving, we thought it would be a good idea to host this webinar, which I hope that you will all find useful. In the bottom left of your screens, you will see a feature that enables you to send in some questions. Please do so, and we'll try and answer as many as we can, either during the webinar or we'll take some at the end. But please be aware that if we don't have a chance to answer all of the questions during the hour that we've allocated today, that we will answer all of the questions that we receive and send some information out to you all on those after the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our key speakers, Noel Coleman and Louis Aloysius. Noel is one of our senior technical consultants with over 16 years experience. He has led and assisted with large numbers of successful Office 365 migration projects dating all the way back to 2013. And more recently, he's been working with our customers to help them get the best out of Teams and the features that it has. Louis has been with OneStore for nearly 10 years, and during that time he's taken on various IT roles, both based on site for customers and internally within OneStore. This has given him the opportunity to implement, again, several Office 365 migrations, as well as serve actually as IT manager for some of our customers also. He's now our own internal IT manager and has been greatly involved in our own adoption and implementation, as well as training of Microsoft Teams. And I'm sure that their hands-on knowledge and expertise will help you today. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Nicola, and a very good morning to everyone joining us, especially those who are joining us overseas from different time zones. So I would also like to introduce Noel, who's on the webinar as well. Noel, are you there?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Great. Thank you. And so what will we get from this webinar? So we're going to aim to provide you an overview of the Teams application. We'll go through some tips, tricks, and best practice for getting the most out of the tool. And we'll hopefully introduce you to some new features that you may not have tried yet. We'll be covering the following areas: a quick orientation, teams and channels, sharing files, storing files, meetings and integrating apps, taking meetings further through the Teams live event feature, which is something we're actually using today to broadcast this webinar on, and what's next on the horizon for Teams before going into the Q&A section. So let's jump into Teams and have a look at what Teams is. Noel?
Thank you, Louis. So before we get into how to use Teams, we just want to understand what is Teams. So Teams is an online collaboration platform encompassing instant messaging, meetings and conferencing, file storage, application integration, and it is fast replacing email as the primary means of communication. We want to also understand how does it stack up against alternatives such as Slack or Zoom, and why would you use Teams? So taking Slack is another collaboration platform with an emphasis on plugins and integrations for other third-party apps, mostly used by online communities and developers. Zoom, however, is aimed primarily at video chat and mainly around distance education, although it has taken prominence in recent weeks. But why would we use Teams? So Teams is constantly evolving. It is aimed to integrate all of the Microsoft tools we already use daily and to best allow us to collaborate using both Office 365 itself and other third-party tools. Being part of the Office 365 platform suite, it allows us to have a single identity and place for all of your collaboration, making it both easier to administer and more secure. And now Lou is going to give you a quick overview on Teams and the quick orientation.
Yes, so just before I jump into this demo we've set up, this is a demo based on a fictitious company with fictitious fictional characters. We're actually impersonating a user called Brent, who's recently joined the company, and we'll also be logging into other accounts from other users to see how they interact with each other. So this is Microsoft Teams desktop app that you can see on your screens now. Most of you should be familiar with the app if you've already tried using Teams. Just a quick orientation with the app. So up here in the top right hand corner where you have your profile icon, there's a menu here where you can set your availability or statuses, and this will control how notifications are displayed to you, especially if you're in the do not disturb setting. You won't get the pop-ups that may distract you from a currently urgent task and so on. You can also change the zoom of the app, so i.e. the text, how large it is or small it is, etc. Next, we have this section here at the top, which most of you are probably been using for search. It's actually known as the command bar. It's quite a useful tool and one of my favorite in Teams. So in order to use some of the commands, you can, for example, type in the / button on your keyboard. So if we click into here and click /, you will get a list of available commands. You can use this to change your status, open a chat to someone, look at what's new with Teams, and so on. The list will show you what's possible. As I mentioned, most people are familiar with this as the search tool. So what I want to highlight here is quite a very interesting search tool. Not only does it search for contacts, it can search within messages, and it can also search within documents. So for example, if I type in the word update and hit enter, on the plane here on the left, you will see that it's got search results from messages where the word update has been mentioned. And if you have a long list of answers, you can actually use more filters to filter down your list to search to find what you're searching for. You can also specify the type of message, whether it was from a chat or a channel, and so on. I mentioned it would also search through your contact list for people in your organization. Obviously, we won't have any matching searches here, but if we had an appropriate search term, they would be listed here. And I mentioned about it searching in files. So here we have a few examples of the results. The great thing here is that it does not only search by the file name, it also searches within the content of the document. So for example, we can clearly see that this document has the word updates in, and therefore it's been brought up as a result. This document has updates within the content of the document and has therefore been brought up as a result, as you can see. Another great feature with the command bar is that, say for example, you're in the middle of reviewing a document through Teams or in a engaging chat, but you need to send a quick message to another individual. You can use the command bar, and if you type in the @ symbol, you can select contacts or type in their names. So for example, I will message Adele, Sorry. And if I select her name, I can type the message within the command bar without needing to jump into another chat window and so on. And that message is actually being sent to Adele. I'm actually logged in as Adele in the web browser here, and you can see that Brent has sent her a message and so on. Next feature within the next icon here along the top, we have the new chat window. So if you click this, it will open a new chat and you can search for a contact and tag their name in here. And if you put multiple contacts, it will open a group chat and you can then send the message accordingly. Moving on, we have the back and forward icons in the top left-hand corner indicated by the arrows. This lets you move back to previous screens that you were in. So for example, if you were working on a document or in a previous chat or group and you moved away and you forgot what it was called or how to get back to it, using the back button, it will take you back to the previous document that you may have had open or the previous chat that you were in and so on. So that's the top bar here. Next, we will look at this section here along the left-hand side, which is the app bar. The first icon we notice is the activity feed. Now, this is a location where it will collect and display messages within Teams or chats where your name or a group that you are a member of has been specifically mentioned. I'm sure some of you are familiar with @mentions, where within the line of the conversation you put the @ and type in a name or a group. What this will do is get the attention of individuals that fall under that category and display an alert to them if they've set their notifications to only alert them where they have been specifically mentioned. We also have a filtering section here, which allows you to filter the list for specific criteria and pre-written types of filters. This 3-dot button here is known as the ellipsis, and we'll also be talking about that as we go along. It usually opens up a menu of further actions that are possible. Next, we have what you should all be familiar with is the chat section. This displays a list of recent chats that you've been involved with. In some cases, you may have an ongoing list going off the page, which you can scroll through. A good way to stay organized in this section is if you highlight a recent chat that you're interested in, if you use the ellipsis button, you can choose to pin that chat. What that will do is list it in the pinned section. Now, this one was already there, but you can see that Alex Weber is pinned there. So what this means is, as you have chats with different people, this list up here will stay static. So you have easy access to it when you need to get to it quickly. Next, we have the calendar icon. Now, for some of you, the calendar icon may not be there. It's only listed if your mailbox is in Exchange Online, so i.e. a part of Microsoft or Office 365. This calendar actually syncs with your Outlook calendar and means that you can generate meeting requests and view your current bookings through here, and they will both be in sync. And Noel will be talking about this section a little bit later on, so we'll come back to this. Next, we have the calls section. This has a list of speed dial or frequent contacts, a list of your main contacts, history of calls received and sent and missed, and so on, and then access to the voicemail if anyone's left you a voicemail. We've also got the files section. We'll be digging deeper into this, but this is where it lists files that have been recently shared with you or you have shared with others and where they've been shared from. So files within chats or within Teams channels, files you've downloaded. And another good feature is this section can also give you access to files within your OneDrive. For those of you who are not familiar with OneDrive, OneDrive is your personal storage area within your organization's Microsoft Office 365 setup. And from here, you can individually share certain documents with individuals. We'll be covering that in a little bit more detail soon. Noel, do you want to show them the flow section or talk about that?
Thank you, Louis. So Flow in here, now called Power Automate, is part of the Power Platform from Microsoft, encompassing Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. In this situation, it allows you to automate steps within Teams, such as updating a team when files are updated, additionally allowing third-party applications such as Dropbox, Adobe Cloud Connect, or even some service desk applications to send messages to individuals or teams when tasks are performed within the application. We have an example which Louis has prepared for you, showing a message being sent to a team when a planner task is added to a planner.
Thanks, Noel. Yes, so that will be demonstrated shortly. We'll just move on to Teams first, and then from there, we'll show you that feature. So next, I want to just mention that the Teams icon is here. And before we get into this, we need to just think about what is a team and how, and the definitions of how to use channels within Teams. So we've completed our orientation. We're now going to dig into teams and channels. So as I said, we need to know what a team is. So a team is a group of people with a common purpose. For example, a sales department, an operations team, a service desk. But it's not just limited to specific departments. You can create teams with members from various departments and including external members who are external to the company to collaborate and work on specific projects or topics and so on. A channel is a way of organizing the different discussions and conversational topics that can be discussed by the team and worked on. So we'll be digging into this in our demo. If I go back to this section, we're now on the Teams tab. Along the left, you will see a list of teams that you are a member of. Most companies create a generic organization-wide team, which you can tell it's organizational wide from the top right-hand corner where this icon is here. Basically, this means anyone with a Teams account will have access to this team and channels. This is great for companies where they want to make announcements, especially at times like this where people are working from home more or from various locations. This will be a central place to make company-wide announcements. You can add different channels to categorize the type of announcements so that people can set their own preferences on how they're notified about posts that are made within the team and the channel. Something to look out for in teams and channels is when you are participating in these conversations, there's a difference between creating a new thread of conversation and replying to an existing message. You can see here on the screen that there's a little reply button below this thread here. So in this case, we'd be replying to the topic here about the next gen product line. But if we use the start new conversation button at the bottom, sorry, box at the bottom, we'd then start a new thread and a different conversational topic. Sometimes people miss this and create new conversation topics in reply to a previous post. And this can sometimes leave posts not being replied to in the order of replies within the thread. So let's have a look at creating a team and joining teams. There are two types of teams. There are private teams and public teams. A public team is a team where you may not be a member of yet, but you have the free choice to join that team. So within this fictional company Contosa, we have a football team. Oops. So if you know that one exists, you can search for the team. Sometimes they will be pre-presented in the first page. And as you can see, it indicates that it is a public team, and you can click the join button to join that team. Now you are basically here subscribing to this team and the feeds of conversations that may take place within it. So here we see the Contoso football team chat group here is listed, and we're now participating, and we can see previous messages that have been sent within this channel. Obviously, in most companies, I imagine a section like this would end up with a lot of banter and sometimes some distracting times. You can leave the team if you wish to do so. You don't have to stay a member of it. But now for more serious needs, let's look at creating a private team. So in our scenario here, we'll create a private team to work on a new company product, the next generation product for this company. So we click on join team, and then you're presented with the wizard. Now you can create a team from an existing group. So if your administrators have grouped people by department and so on, you can go and browse for those groups, or you can create a team from scratch where you want specific individuals and so on. So we click that. We're then presented the question of, will this be a private or public team? We'll click private. We'll give this team a name. We'll click create. What this is doing is in the background, it's creating the team, creating the general channel. And when it creates a channel, it actually creates in the background a SharePoint site to host the data that you are going to be sharing and discussing within that channel. While it's created that in the background, it's now asking us to provide a list of members who will be a part of this team. So in our case, we will add Adele. We'll add Alan. We'll add Deborah. Now, sometimes you may have a long list of people to add, and they might be part of a smaller group that already exists. So in this case, we may want to add the dev team. We click add. Teams will now review the list you've submitted and work out if members are already part of another listing and so on. So here we see from the list that one member already existed in the team. That's because as Brent, who creates the team, I'm automatically a part of the team when creating, and I had been listed within the dev team group, so it's notified me of that. And here are the additional members we added. We can promote members to become owners of the team, so they have additional rights in terms of inviting new people or removing members. So in this case, we'll make Adele an owner, and the same for Alan. And click close. So now the team has been created, the members have been added. Within the team, you may want to now create channels to separate the topics of discussion. So with our project, we'll create an additional channel. So we'll click on the ellipsis button, which will give us this menu. We will then click on add channel. We'll create a channel called Dev and UAT. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it's development and user acceptance testing. We want this channel to be accessible for everyone within the team, and we want this to be visible on everyone's list at all times. So we'll tick this box here. We can also create private channels, which can be limited access to a subset of the members of the team. So for example, we may wish to create a private team for management and budget. So not all members would need to have access to this. So in the same way, we'll click through here. And this time on the privacy option, we will select private. This will actually hide and prevent access to this channel from members who are not invited to this channel. When we click next, it will create the channel and then request us to specify the members. So in this case, we will make Idel and Alan members. Click add and then done. So now that you can see this channel has been created, you'll notice there's a padlock icon. This indicates that this is a private channel and this will not be listed at all within the other members who are not being delegated access or membership to this channel. A feature within Teams that you can utilize when having when working on large projects and so on is you can create a planner task, Kanban board style management system to allocate tasks to workers and use to track progress. So how do we do this? So in the top here along these tabs, there's a add tab button. If you click this, you'll get a list of various apps that you can add to Teams. There's also third-party apps, and sometimes your company may already be using some of these, so you can actually integrate those with Teams within your company. So in our case, we're going to add the planner, and this will bring up a wizard to do so. In this case, we'll be adding a new planner as this is a new project. Now, if you're working in large companies and there's an existing larger planner that someone else has created, you can actually search them from here. So in this case, we'll call it OK, and click Save. What this does is create the planner in the background and add it as a tab along the top. Here you can create tasks and allocate them to different people in a Kanban style management, and also create additional columns in order to track the statuses of different tasks. And you can label these as you see fit. I will just show you an existing one that we have already in circulation so you can see what's going on. So if I go into the sales and marketing team in our general tab, we can see an existing planner. Now, Noel mentioned earlier about how we've set up a Power Automate flow that will trigger a message to the teams every time a new task is added. Now, this process does have a slight delay in that you create the task and then the process in the back end runs and then generates the message. So there is sometimes a 1 or 2 minute delay, which is normal within Teams for that message to appear. So we've created this new test today with capital T's, and we recently created website banners and new posters and so on. If I go to the general channel, you will see previous tasks that have been created, and we can see our tasks that we just created here. Another interesting feature within Teams channels that I want to highlight is the wiki. This is an area for hosting data which is constant. So say if you have information that you want to make available to your team, but it's just static for just reference, this is a good place to put it, and members can view this section and review the different headings and so on, data that's been shared. We also want to talk about files, which we'll go into in the next section. So you can possibly think of Teams and channels as an evolution of instant messaging within Teams, but better. So let's look at sharing files and storing files. Just a quick thing to highlight with sharing and files in chats and in Teams via channels. When you share a file in chat, it's actually stored within your personal OneDrive, and then access is granted to that document on an individual basis, so with whomever you've shared that document to. When you drag and drop a file into Teams, it's not shared from its original location, but a copy of the document is shared. If you're already using OneDrive to store your files and you have a file structure within there, when you use the share files option, you can actually share directly from its current location in OneDrive without it needing to create separate copies. In Teams and channels, when you upload a file into those channels, a copy is shared into a SharePoint document library and then made available for all members of the team or channel who have access to that section. Permissions are automatically shared and version control is enabled from SharePoint running in the backend. So what does that look like? So in our example here, we have the monthly reports files section. There's another tab here which collates all the files you've shared over the many occasions where files have been dropped in and so on within the team channel. As you can see, we have a list here, and we can also view this list from SharePoint from using the tab here. This will open a web page to the SharePoint site running in the backend supporting this team. As you can see, it's a similar list of files, just ordered in a different way. Now, the great thing about having SharePoint at the back end of Teams file storage is that, as I mentioned, you get version control. So those of you familiar with SharePoint, you know you can go to a item in here, select the ellipsis, and then go to the version control. You can download a file, manage access, so share to people who are outside of the team, but who may need access to a single document and so on. You can automate tasks into Power Automate and so on. You can also set up alerts. So if your subordinates or team members are updating these files, you can have a summary of alerts emailed to you at a frequency that you dictate. And if you click on the Alert Me button, you will reach this section where you can specify the conditions at which you are alerted. So you can choose if anything changes or if someone else changes a document or a document created by yourself and so on. And then you have a notification option of an immediate notification, daily summary or weekly summary, and so on. And you can specify the times of when to receive these. So that should cover storing and sharing files within Teams and how to access them. We'll now move on to looking at meetings and integrating apps, and I will hand over to Noel to cover that.
Thanks, Louis. So thanks to Louis, we've now seen the use of Teams and channels, as well as how files are handled. So now you might want to organise some meetings. There are several ways to do this. You can request a meeting within Outlook and it will sync to Teams, as Louis has covered. However, we're already in the Teams app, so how do we go about organising a meeting? I have a few brief demonstrations on how you do this. So here we see Brent and Alan having a discussion about setting up a meeting. So we go into the calendar, add a new item, type in a subject for the meeting, invite our attendees, confirm the time is correct, and add a location. This we'll go into this shortly as to why we're adding a conference room. And we give it a brief update as to why the purpose of the meeting. So once we've done that, we hit send, and voila, we now have our meeting done. So now comes to the time of the meeting. And in this scenario, we are Alan wants to display his intentions for the product, but they are in different physical locations, so they're going to use the whiteboard feature. There are several ways to do this using the Teams built-in app or a Windows app. As Brent is the intended recipient and is just viewing the whiteboard, he is just going to use it within Teams. Alan is connected both from his laptop while simultaneously using his brand new iPad Pro, as he wanted to show off some of his drawing skills and be able to use the snap to shape feature and write some notes. Unfortunately, as we can see, his drawing skills are somewhat lacking. So here we can see him drawing out his intended ideas for the meeting, and we've ended the meeting. So Brent found that quite useful, and they now want to have a regular catch up. So we're going to arrange a recurrent meeting. We do this in much the same way. We go to our new meeting. We go to add a title about the subject of the meeting. We select the time, so in this circumstance, the next week, and we set it to repeat weekly. And we add a location. We're adding a location because this room has a physical phone within the room, and Teams allows us to bring in conference phones as well as allow external attendees to dial in. So we've now created a meeting, and we just check just to make sure that it's done. So there we go. Unfortunately, during the previous meeting, Brent was both late to the meeting and was very unflattering about Alan's handwriting and diagrammatic skills, something he didn't take too kindly to. So he is now going to arrange a performance review meeting with Brent. In this example, we can see Brent checking his email to review the meeting request. And he's going to go into meeting details. As we can see, there is a telephone number and conference ID. Now, this isn't a local number for him. So in this scenario, he's going to try and find the local number dedicated to this meeting room. This allows local attendees, regardless of geographical location, to join by a phone. So he's happy he's found the right number, and he's now going to accept the meeting request. And there we go. So now has come the time of the meeting, and they are going to discuss the ongoing points that Alan wanted to bring up. But as this is a performance review meeting, Alan also wants it recorded. So he goes to the record, and he can now all of the attendees see a bar telling them that this meeting has been recorded. They discuss the ongoing points and so forth, the required improvements, and then when it comes to an end, Alan wants to just be 100% certain that the recording is done. So he clicks on the ellipses and ends the recording. And that draws the meeting to a close. So now you may want to refer to that meeting recording in the future. So how do we go about doing that? So in this scenario, Alan has logged into the Office 365 portal. He is now looking for an application called Stream. He already has it on his bar, but if we click on All Apps, we can now see all of the different applications, and he's going to go to Stream. He's going to have a quick look around, see if he can see it in the trending videos. Unfortunately not. So he's now going to go to My Content. And here we can see all the videos, meetings, and so forth. We're going to go to Videos. And at the top, we can see the recording. So we can now go back and review that. Now, in this situation, it'll also come up with captions on the right-hand side where you see interactivity for the meeting request. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Louis, who's going to talk about taking your meetings to the next level.
Thanks, Noel. I'll just reshare the slides from my side. Okay, So we've now seen what happens with meetings. And we'll be looking at taking meetings further with Teams live events. So as I mentioned earlier, this webinar is actually being broadcasted to you using the Teams live event features. When would you really use Teams live events? So it's designed for a situation where you have a small number of presenters or speakers delivering content or message to a large audience, where a simple, regular meeting room or conference call would not hack the numbers that will be involved. We'll show you how to set it up for internal and external participants, and then how to access recordings. And well, you already got access to the Q&A features, so we'll just touch on that briefly. So in our example, we'll open up Teams, we'll go into our calendar. In the calendar, in the top right-hand corner, you have the new meeting button and a drop-down icon. If you click on this, you will see that the live event button is available. Now, I mentioned earlier that the calendar is only visible if your mailbox is in Office 365. And therefore, you will only be able to schedule the live event if the account you are using has a mailbox hosted in Office 365. So we'll click on live event. This will bring up the wizard for new live event. We'll give it a title. We'll then specify the start, end, dates and times, which we'll just leave here as it is. We can specify the time zone, and we can put some details or an agenda for the meeting in here, and so on. You can then invite presenters to this event. So, for example, we might have Adele and Alan. And then we'll click next. What this does is create a calendar invite for your presenters so that they have a link created in their calendars for the event. Now, in terms of your invitees or attendees, you now have a section where you set the live event permissions. So you can specify it to be available to only people within your company of specifically named or a group. You can also set it to be organization-wide, so anyone within your company with a log on to Teams can log in, or via a web browser. And then public. This option will allow anyone with the link to the event to join from a web browser. So in our case, if this was a live product demo event, we'll click public. We'll then go into the options here. Here you can specify if recordings will be available to attendees. So what that means is if anyone who couldn't attend the live event or wants access to a recording afterwards, including those who attended, they can use the same link to get access to the recording and view it through their web browser and so on. You can also get captions to be displayed in the event. This is a feature that's being rolled out by tenancy, so it may not be available straight away for your Teams tenant, but it will be coming soon. And it will allow translation to up to 6 languages. You can also get an attendee engagement report. So this will create a list of how many people joined and how long they joined for. If people joined submitting their names, it will show their name. If they joined in anonymous mode, it will just create a unique ID which doesn't display their name and displays that as their duration. You can then enable the Q&A feature. Now, sometimes in these events, a Q&A may not be appropriate, so you have the option to enable and disable that. And then you click schedule, and that creates the event and generates the link. So if you click up here, that will actually copy a link to your clipboard that you can then share to your external attendees or internal attendees, either through a Teams-wide message or emails out to participants. Once you've created the event, how do you get into it? So if you go back to the calendar, click on the item you have created and click join, it will load up the event for the producer and the presenters. Now, I mentioned producer and presenters. So a producer is a role within the event that allows a certain level of control where you can specify which camera feeds or screen sharing content to be broadcasted, queue up the next feed, and mute people's microphones if there's some sort of audio disturbance and so on. Now, within this demo, I can't display that, but I can show you a screen of the control of what we're actually using today. So this is our screen section here. On the left, you have the queue. So if someone else was presenting video, so if I queue my video feed, I can queue it up. I can then send that live. And then this will be broadcasted on your screens right now. We'll then go back to the presentation content. And you have the options to mute and enable participants as necessary, and they can unmute themselves to join into the conference. And that's basically Teams live events. I'm just going to hand over to Noel to talk about what's next with Teams and what's on the horizon. Hello, Noel.
Thank you, Louis. So there are a few new features that are coming out in Teams over the next sort of few weeks or to a month that we thought you might be interested in. So the first thing is they are now bringing out 9 video participants in a meeting, which has been increased from 4. So you may want to be aware that even though you're not talking, you may still be on the screen. The next feature is they are bringing out pop-out chat, which allows you to have multiple chats, meetings, phone calls on the screen at any one time rather than just one, so you can have them on multiple screens and so forth. They are also now bringing out raising hand in meetings, which allows meeting attendees to let others know that they want to raise a point rather than experiencing the constant chatting over people and interruptions that some of you may have become accustomed to. And one of the nicest features, the Teams Outlook integration. So you'll be able to share an email with attachments to a team or channel. You'll be able to share a Teams conversation via Outlook without the need to leave Teams. And you can also see the latest activity and respond to missed activity emails from Outlook. So you'll be able to post content directly from Outlook into a Teams message via replying that way. So we thought those are some of the features that people may like that are coming up. And now I'll hand you back to Nicola, who will talk about how we can go about helping you going forward.
Thank you, both of you, for such an insightful webinar. Before we move on to questions, I'd just like to share with you some things which I think might be of interest and let you know that whatever we're going to talk about just very briefly next, I'll round up and send all of the links and any attachments that you might need to you all in an email after this webinar. So you will all have access to if you want to take any next steps or any further support. So the first thing is that we have created a how-to guide for setting up Microsoft Teams live events, which some of you may find useful if you're looking to hold your own all hands meetings or town hall meetings as we do in OneStore. That's exactly how we communicate organisation wide at the moment. So we'll send you a brief guide on that. You may also be interested to know that Microsoft currently has some free trials which they're promoting, and one of them is for free Office 365, which includes Microsoft Teams. So the trial is it's free for 6 months and it's for up to 3,000 users. If your business is thinking of onboarding Teams and Office 365, it could be quite commercially advantageous to consider it now. But they do have actually quite a few different promotions running, so it's worth touching base with us to find out if there's anything that more suitable for you. And again, you know, there'll be a link within that email for you to be able to do that. If you want to talk more specifically about your own organisation circumstances with regards to Office 365, or discuss strategies to adopt the wider Microsoft suite, such as SharePoint, Dynamics or Azure implementations, we'd be more than happy to share our experiences of this with you. And again, there'll be a link in that email for you to contact us to do that. And lastly, it is being widely reported at the moment that cybercrime is on the rise, and during this period, phishing attacks have seen exponential growth. So we really want to try and help customers and potential customers to ensure that their networks and endpoints and devices are secure. And we'd like to offer you a free, or your organisation, a free threat and vulnerability assessment, which can interrogate your network and highlight any critical vulnerabilities. And on that email, there will be a link if you're responsible for your IT and you're concerned about the security now that you've got sort of more disparate networks, and you want to make sure or have visibility of any vulnerabilities that you may have, then there'll be a link there for you to get in touch with us to do that. So just before we move into questions, we're going to be posting a link, which is a feedback form, into this webinar, and I'd be very grateful for any feedback that you're able to give us today, please, as it will help us to sort of better shape our future educational programme. So I thank you in advance for doing that, and I'm going to move quickly into questions now. I'll invite a few more members to join the discussion to help us out with questions where appropriate. So please welcome Peter Lukes, Francesca, Colin and Faz, and I will take us through some questions now. So I think we've been busily answering many of the questions that have come in. Thank you all for being so involved and engaged with the webinar so far. So we have Scott from Hessia. Thank you. Hi, Scott. You've asked, when running a Teams live event, is there a way to see who is attending or attended and for how long? Louis, are you able to answer that?
Hi, yes, you can't see it live while the event is going on directly, but you can see it through the engagement report that is generated at the end of the event, which will be available to the producer and presenters.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that has answered that question. How do you invite late members into a meeting that has already been set up? Maybe that's one to quickly talk through as well, Louis, while I still have you.
I think Noel would probably be best to answer this, but I do believe there is a invite button within the meeting options while you're in the meeting to add additional participants or ring them into it. Is that right, Noel?
That is correct. Yeah, when you are hosting a meeting, one of the extra buttons that you'll see through the ellipses is invite additional attendees. You can also obviously go through and edit the meeting request from your calendar, and the new person will get it and be able to join via their calendar as well.
Perfect, thank you. And Mon, I think we may have covered this, but actually just to have some clarity around this, can we invite people that do not have an Outlook email? I guess that's into a meeting.
Yes, you can. You can invite external participants into meetings using sort of contact links and so forth. So they don't need to be part of your organisation, but it depends on how your meeting policies have been set up. So it may be something you may need to review. So it might be your IT administrators have stopped that from happening for specific security reasons. So we're more than happy to assist if there is anything we can do there to help.
Great, thank you again, Noel. And just moving down, some of these I think have already been covered through the webinar, but we will take the time to answer these questions fully before we send these questions out to you, but I won't cover them on the webinar as right now. Hi, Peter.
Yeah, there's a question about the use of Outlook calendar and Teams calendars, and I think it's quite interesting because I certainly feel that now, whereas my day used to be spent inhabiting Outlook, I now inhabit Teams and drop back throughout the day to look at what's happening in my email environment, whereas I think months ago I would have spent the day sitting within my email environment. So I started my journey with Teams inviting people to Teams events through my Outlook calendar, and I've now transitioned effectively to using the calendar within Teams rather than the calendar within Outlook. And I think it's just interesting, the transition between using one collaboration tool, which is email, to using Teams, which is essentially a tool which I think is bringing the end of the email environment.
Yeah, Peter, absolutely. I'd really like to add to that as well. I think it's fantastic that you can use Teams not only for email, but also all of the different applications like the Planner app, OneNote, Shifts, Power BI. You can have them all in one application, so you don't need to be switching constantly, and you can obviously collaborate on all of those. So maybe that's something that we'll cover in a future session. One thing to note though is, in order to enable all of that and specifically to be able to view your calendar from inside Teams, I think Louis mentioned this earlier, but you need to have migrated your email into Office 365 as well. So you can actually use Teams without having done that, but it does unlock more functionality. If you want some more information on this, all of our team are happy to help.
Brilliant, thank you both very much. That's very clear. Also, there is another question here. Is there a translation tool in Teams to convert files into another language? It's a good question.
Actually, it's Colin. I think I can answer that. Yes, there is a tool available. It needs to be switched on from the admin portal, but it is there. You just allow it and it should work.
Brilliant, thank you. So, question here from Cosimo. Hi, Cosimo. The flow feature that you were talking about does not appear on my version of Teams. Is there a reason for that?
I'll take that one. So in your Teams interface, below Teams or whatever's at the bottom, there'll be an ellipses, the 3 dots. If you click on that, you'll be able to add additional applications to your Teams interface. So in our example, we've already added flow, and you can actually also rearrange the icons as well within that, and that's why you might not be able to see it by default.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Noel. Another question here. While in video chat, can you turn off the text chat, I think this might mean, to prevent people contacting each other? That might be a question that we might need to just get some confirmation on. So, but if you are able to just clarify that in the questions, if you send in another question and just clarify that a bit further, we might be able to get to that before the end.
Yeah, and obviously we've got published and unpublished questions which are coming up through the meeting chat as well.
Yeah, great. But we will answer that question for you. Just scrolling through the questions, I think we have answered most either through the webinar or at the end of this session, and the rest are just very conscious of time now. We are coming up to our 60 minutes. I think the rest we might need to take offline and answer, but again, we will answer all of them and send you a copy to this link out after the webinar has closed when we've prepared the email. So for now, we have used our 60 minutes. So we will sign off now, but I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that's attended the webinar today. We have had a huge number of participants, which we're really grateful for. We hope that it's been insightful for you and that you've gained a lot out of it. Please do send us the feedback on the link if you can, and I'll just take the opportunity to wish you a very good day, and we hope to speak to you soon. So thank you all very much indeed.